So who do you see, or what do you see when you look in the mirror? Okay, it's not necessarily a question you don't have to say. It's quite difficult to really judge ourselves accurately when we're perceiving who we are or what we see with our natural eyes, right? So maybe I have to go back a little bit. Okay, so we have our natural eyes, the ones that we're all looking at each other now. And that's what we use, obviously, when we look in the mirror. And what we get the reflection back is what we perceive who we are, what we do, what we have, what abilities we have, whether we're short or tall. And then sometimes what I find when I'm walking past the mirror, just some days, does anybody close their eyes sometimes when they walk past the mirror? Or try to do a side step, like, oh yeah, I didn't see the mirror over there, and just walk past, just sometimes, depending on the day, right? So, and we do that sometimes to avoid addressing things, or you might not like what you see in the mirror. Some of us are very happy to see what we see in the mirror. But in life, sometimes though, we do need to close our natural eyes to natural circumstances that we see around us. So do you remember last week I was talking about, if you've watched the replay or you were here, I talked about over here, we're seeing things in the natural and the problems and all the things like that. And over here, we're seeing things from God's perspective, from the Spirit. So we should all be up to date with that. If you're not, don't worry, we'll review it a little bit later on. But what I mean by life is that sometimes we have to close our eyes and put our hands over our ears to not get caught up so much in everything that's going around us. You know, if like you constantly listen to the news and you're affected by it, and with what else is going on? The riots and the injustices and all the stuff's going on, like it can start to become all-consuming. You know, or if we look at our life and go, okay, I need to fix this, I've got to fix that, it can become overwhelming. So what I mean by closing our eyes is that sometimes we have to close them, and I'm speaking a bit metaphorically. I'm not saying close your eyes right now and stop bumping into walls. I don't mean that. I mean metaphorically, okay? To actually benefit us to start looking at things from Christ's perspective, to start seeing situations from Christ's perspective. So either we're looking at all the evidence that's going around us and the viewpoints that everybody else has and the viewpoints that we perceive, or we've got to look at another perspective. But which is the real perspective, I wonder? Is it all the things that we're facing, or is it what is often unseen that's going on beneath the surface? So these are things that we're going to be looking at a little bit today. What is the real perspective? Okay, what is the real reality going on around us? If we can catch that, that helps us to be able to manage different issues in our life and the cares of life, and we don't get too burdened down with everything. So we can choose what mirror we look into. So there can be two main mirrors. We can either look into a mirror made by man, yeah, that's been made by man, and we can look in that mirror and determine everything based off that. Or there's another kind of mirror. There's the mirror of the mind of Christ, which is looking at things from Christ's perspective. So that's just the way I explain it. That's not in the Bible. I'm not saying that the Bible says that there's mirrors, but we either choose to look at what Christ sees in the mirror, or we look at what we naturally perceive and see what's going on in the mirror. Or we look at what Christ says about, you know, your elections coming up. Or we look at what Fox News, CNN, whoever you listen to, according to your political persuasion, who you choose to gather your information, or maybe you don't watch the news, okay? So, based on what we see really has a lot to do with what we'll become. What we think on, as we know as well, it's got a lot to do with what we'll become as well. The Bible talks about as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. Okay, that's not on your notes. I just added that one in. So one of the stories that's a really good example of different types of perceptions is with Moses, with Joshua and Caleb, when they went out to spy out the land. Does everybody know that story? So hopefully we don't need to go over the whole story, but it's in Numbers chapter 13 and 14. But Joshua, the spies who went out, the men that Moses sent out to go and spy out the land, there were two in there, and we know that they are Joshua and Caleb. Joshua and Caleb saw something very different to the other men. Okay, based on what they saw, determined. Numbers 13 verse 30 says, then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, let us go up at once and take possession of it, the land, yeah? For we will certainly conquer it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people of Canaan, for they are too strong for us. So they gave the Israelites a bad report about the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we went, in spying it out, so basically looking at it, is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. There we saw the Nephilim, the sons of, I don't know if it's Anak or part of the Nephilim, and we were like grasshoppers in our own sight. Okay, and so we were in their sight. And then we've got Joshua and Caleb's account, okay, in I think it's Numbers 14, and it said, the land through which we passed as spies is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, then he will bring us unto this land and give it to us, a land which flows with milk and honey. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not fear the people of the land, for they will be our prey. Their protection has been removed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. So if you are on one team, say you were an additional woman on the team going out to sit down, which team would you think you'd be on? Do you think you'd be on Joshua and Caleb's team? Or do you think you'd be on the other men's team? Okay, so that's a good thing to stop asking yourself, you know. And also we can look at it, you know, if someone said, oh, you know, the world is ending. The world is ending. We can see it. It's happening. Which team would you be on? Would you be on the team like, oh my goodness, get into our shelters, whatever? Stop. Or even with the coronavirus, there's two types of camps, wasn't there? Or maybe others. So we've got the conspiracy theories kind of group. We've got the people like God's got it all under control. We've got the people that stockpile toilet roll. And there's the people like God will provide. I don't need to go crazy in the supermarket. You know, we sit on different spectrums, and some of us are just in the middle. We're just like, I don't really know what's going on. So what we see, or what we think we see, can determine our actions of what we do and how we live. So 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verse 18 says, however, so we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are unseen. This is going to be a really important verse for us today. But the things which are unseen, for the things which are visible are temporal. They're just brief and fleeting, but the things which are invisible are everlasting and imperishable. That's Amplified version. So we're looking at here at the verse is telling us that the things that, so we look not at the things that are seen. We've got to really, really think about, well, how do I not look at the things which are seen? Have you ever thought about that when you read that? Well, how do I not look at the things that are seen, but at the things we're meant to look at are unseen? We're meant to look at the unseen things? How's that possible? Okay, so we're going to look at that in a little bit as we go on. But what you look at changes your mind and perceptions, which then changes your life. Pretty basic stuff, right? Now, Jesus is a really good example, obviously, when we're talking about the mind of Christ. How did he see things? How did he make decisions? Okay, so in John 5:19, it says, so Jesus answered them by saying, I assure you, and most solemnly say to you, the Son can do nothing of himself, of his own accord, unless it is something he sees, not what just he sees, but he says he sees the Father doing. Whatever the Father does, the Son in his turn also does in the same way. So Jesus didn't do things of his own accord. He did it based off what he was seeing something, okay? And he was doing what he sees the Father doing. Now, we know that God the Father wasn't, according to the eyewitnesses, just there walking along where everyone's, oh, there's God, there's the Father, yeah, and now I see Jesus, yeah, that's them walking down the garden of this or doing that. We didn't see that. So, and we didn't read that. So we know that Jesus was seeing something. Okay, he was seeing what the Father was doing, and some say, well, he is God, so he must have had some kind of connection, right? Constantly seeing maybe two parallels. But he wasn't using his natural eyes, because otherwise all the disciples would have seen God the Father as well. And the Bible says that he's invisible. Okay, we don't see him, not that way. So this gives us a few things to think about. If we really want to run in victory, okay, if we really want to find freedom, if we want to know how to walk and things like that, then we have to fix our gaze on what Christ sees. We need to fix our gaze on his vision of what he sees, which is typically, for most of us, is going to be higher than that. No, I'll say definitely higher than natural thoughts. But if you are, depending, we're all in different stages of our walk, you may see a lot of stuff and be constantly hearing from the Lord, and maybe your ways and his ways are quite in sync for some of you. For some of you, be like, no, that's not what's going on with me. Okay, so often I find we look at things from a very narrow perspective. Or like those who were spying out the land, they just basically saw giants. So that's what they wanted to see, or that's what they told. That's the report they gave. In fact, they were judged heavily, weren't they, for giving a bad report and discouraging everybody else around them as well. So God takes it very seriously, what we claim we see and what we also then go and share as a report for others. Okay, so we that's a very serious point to say there. We often see like they saw the giants before us. I'm getting ready to move house, and there was a moment at the very beginning of that news that I started paying, my natural eyes started seeing all the potential giants, all the potential issues. Okay, it's a really big move. It's going to cost us a lot of money. Building a house and we've got to spy out land, right? Because we're looking to buy land. It's not as easy as I thought. Okay, there's a lot more to it in the UK, especially because it's not as common as in the US. So I could have looked at that, or we can be looking at tragedy and pain and struggle and things we're struggling with in our own personal life, and we kind of get a very narrow perspective. But that's all there is to this. It's too hard. I can't do this. Or I'll always struggle with this. Or I'll always struggle with that. And often we can have a very, very narrow perspective. But we don't rest our hope on these things. We don't rest our opinion, or whether we can do something on what we see, as we've just read in the previous verse. In 2 Corinthians, we've got to look at things from an eternal, unseen perspective. Now, for some of us, that can be really hard, because we're like, I don't see beyond what I naturally see. Okay, and so we're going to look at how we're going to do that, and how I'm going to help you learn how to see in the Spirit, to see how Jesus saw. I've been asked so much, Sophia, show me, how do you hear and see all this stuff? And I was like, I don't actually know. It just happens. Okay, but I started going to the Lord, and it's like, no, it doesn't just happen. Here's how. So that I'm going to share. Obviously, we're limited to time, but I will try my best to share as much with you as you